Hey, good evening, everybody. Excited to have the opportunity to talk to Sir Peter Beck and Adam Spice once again. Very fortunate. This is like the third or fourth time we've been able to share post quarterly results, what's been going on at the organization, the future of the workflows that are going on within the organization, and of course, just macroeconomic thoughts with respect to what's going on in the space industry and how well Rocket Lab is suited to continue to progress as we have, in my opinion, a global space race ongoing. Um, and that doesn't necessarily mean bad things, but just in general, everybody's trying to get to space right now. And with that, everybody's trying to secure their slots, whether that is from a satellite perspective, a launch perspective. So, very exciting to see the quarterly results, excited to see the forecast for Q2. And of course, I think more importantly, when I have these calls, I don't really like to think about the numbers so much, but really about how they're steering the ship and how they're acting behind the scenes. The numbers are a byproduct of the great work that Sir Peter Beck and Adam Spice do on a day-to-day basis. And not only them, but the team, the almost 2,000 people that now work very actively across multiple continents now. Yeah, it's mind-boggling how this business has grown since I've invested in it, starting in the 2020-2021 timeframe, and how much it's grown obviously since 2006, and what Pete has done over the last 19 years. So excited to share this with you guys. Big shout out to Scott, Dave, Vince, and Muriel as well at Rocket Lab Communications for setting this up. As always, very humbled to even be in the conversation, and just the fact that we're able to give us both an hour is mind-boggling. Like we kind of crept over that 30-minute mark, and I was just like, I'm not going to say anything if somebody else doesn't. And then I think Dave was good enough, to step in and say, hey, what do you guys think? And Pete was lucky to say, hey, I have to the top of the hour. So he gave us an entire hour. So, wow, it was just a great conversation. And as always, I always learn so much from these guys every time I have some sort of uncertainty or I'm questioning why they're doing things. And in this particular case, I was questioning the ATM piece. Why are they going to the ATM? And Adam's answer is just brilliant. And it makes 100% sense. And it just goes to show you that these guys have so much forethought into everything that they do, and methodical execution. It's astonishing. So anyway, 3 minutes of me just rambling. You've probably clicked to somebody else's YouTube link of it now, but hopefully you're still watching on my channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next quarter. Cheers.
Today we have a new interview with Sir Peter Beck and Adam Spice of Rocket Lab. We're going to ask you guys some questions about the Q1 earnings and some questions that the retail investors might want to have answers for. We want to congratulate you on a fantastic quarter, which we felt it was. And yeah, let's shoot away with the questions. So the first question that I wanted to ask, it feels like on the Neutron, you guys have sold the next 3 slots. 2 was for a confidential customer, and 1 is to the US Air Force. And do you know when you're going to be flying your own satellite on Neutron, and what goes into the, prioritizing customers versus your own constellation?
Yeah, no, hey Vince. So that it's really, the priority is to flesh out Neutron as a commercial launcher first, before we start flying our own stuff. Now, we'll be opportunistic if we have spare capacity. Just not that dissimilar that we do with Electron. If we want to develop new hardware or get some flight heritage on some new hardware, we'll take that opportunity. But we're not really at the point yet where we are assigning tails to our own stuff. Like I say, we'll always take opportunities when they come, but we're not there yet.
All right.
Yeah, maybe I'll just hop in with a Neutron question then. I was going through the payload guide, and I don't claim to understand the majority of it, but I did think it was pretty interesting how you had the two modules there, the upper module and the lower module, and how you could transport them separately. And just curious, I don't think I've seen that before. So what was the decision making on that, and like what benefits does it give you?
Yeah, so there's kind of two ways to integrate Neutron. One is that kind of horizontal module approach, and we developed that for that approach. What that does is it negates the necessity for a vertical stacking tower, and really that's just a capex decision. So in the ideal kind of full flow high cadence rate, we always said that we never want to break over the rocket. So literally the rocket will come off the barge, get transported back to the launch site, and then there's a kind of a gantry tower building that rolls over the rocket and can integrate in the second stage satellites and stack, the second stage and satellite stack all in one unit, and drop it into the Hungry Hippo and close it and then go. So the rocket never ever ceases from being vertical. But obviously a big rollover tower integration building is a fairly expensive capital item, and for the initial launches we just do that by breaking off the module and shipping the module. This kind of follows a similar approach we did with Electron, right? So we didn't go out and build 2 launch pads and 3 clean rooms and a whole bunch of facilities. We started off with 1 hangar, 1 clean room, and then as the vehicle started flying and the cadence increases, then we make those investments. Well, and the investments are largely paid for by the operation of the vehicle anyway. So it's just more of a phased approach than anything else. There are some reasons why you might want to integrate in that horizontal module 1 configuration as well. So it just gives us also the extra flexibility to do that.
I can chime in on that. So with the success in testing so far on the Neutron campaign, the videos that you guys put out, a stage 1 qualification and everything, I feel like we're getting very close. You're starting to see the milestones get closer and closer to launch. And I feel like we're getting to a place where a lot of these milestones are pumping up at the end. We're going to move very quickly once we get there. So how far do you feel like we are from seeing a fully integrated Neutron at Wallops? And then how quickly would we see a wet dress rehearsal after that? Would it be imminent? And then obviously what kind of timeline, once we kind of get a wet dress rehearsal, if everything goes successfully, of course, how long would it be from a wet dress to launch? Fully recognizing that obviously not everything can be successful, but I'm very optimistic of a successful.
Yeah, well, you just laid out the dream run, right? If you look at all the milestones that we put up, and we kind of at pains to reiterate that they're all happening concurrently. Some of them, as you point out, are very, very close to completion. Some of them are dependent on each other. A lot of them are independent on each other, and it's kind of really hard to kind of show graphically. And also, we in some areas we're right at the the nitty gritty, the end tests where they're the big all up tests. Like take stage 1 module, for example. Every element, every piece of software is kind of in that, and we're in this kind of all up big testing phase. So it's very tempting to say, well, I'll call that done because it's like 98% done, but until it's 100% done, it's not 100% done in our world. And then you're right. So as those components get integrated, providing we don't find any issues, then you move pretty quickly into a wet dress. And then if you do a wet dress and you find no issues, then you move very quickly into a launch. Now, I think we should all be kind of realistic about that. I mean, you're building an integrated complex machine for the first time. We all hope that there's going to be no issues, but there could easily be things that crop up along the way. So we always you've heard me say many times everything's great until it's not, but at the moment we haven't had any kind of major project setbacks or things that have just gone super pear-shaped, and we continue to track. If you look at an Electron wet dress, for example, we'll wet dress the day before and then go fly. But if you look at the very first Electron, we wet dressed, and it was quite some time before we actually flew, because we were trying to understand the rocket and all the new systems that you stand up. So I think we're certainly better than we were when we did the Electron, but I think you can measure how good we are when we actually get to that point.
Yeah, it's good feed, and I'm sure we'll see milestones quickly. You guys have been doing a phenomenal job. A follow up to that, I know when you guys were building the Archimedes, that first one that got onto the at Stennis, I was very surprised to see that number 2 and number 3 came out very quickly to join it. Yep. And obviously now you guys are doubling capacity. I'm curious, before I hand it over to somebody else, are you guys already in works to create another stage 2, stage 1 with the Neutron? Or are you waiting to get a kind of a fully integrated dynamic test before you kind of roll out the model number 2s or serial number 2s rather for Neutron?
No, I mean, we intend to try and fly 3 times next year. That's our ramp rate. So we're building multiple flights worth of hardware now. And that's part of the scaling efforts that we've talked about. We've kind of moved slightly past the minimum viable product to investing in like the barge return on investment, and multiple serial numbers. So that's in the components and areas we have super confidence, and we're plowing straight forward.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and by the way, part of what's consuming cash right now is exactly what Pete is saying. It's one thing to get to minimum viable product and infrastructure, but now we're actually investing in subsequent tails. We're investing, like Pete said, in the barge and so forth. So that's all about scaling the business, but it's starting to show up now in kind of the working capital needs of the business. So it's all good stuff. It's just a matter of, that's why, we're so focused on making sure that we've done all the right things and put everything in place so that we can kind of just deliver on the expectations. And flying a new rocket, 3 times next year when the first launch is in the second half of this year, that's not an easy task, right? So we got to make sure that we're doing all the preparatory stuff. And I think we've made a lot of investments in the team and other parts of the business to really enable that. That really wasn't in place 7 years ago when Electron was just beginning to ramp.
Perfect. Thank you.
Since Electron was brought up, if you guys don't mind me pivoting, during Q1, we saw the 8 new Electron signings, 4 of which were the second batch of IQPS. And then if we look at the other 4 that were signed during the quarter, it looks like the ASP lines up nicely with what could be assumed to be 4 Haste launches. Is a 50-50 split between Electron and Haste a fair assumption? And if so, is the Kratos mission that was announced in April, is that one of these presumed Haste signings?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and have a look at that information. I mean, it's true that the Haste ASPs are generally higher because the mission requirements are a lot more complex, ironically, than going to orbit. It's I'd have to. Yeah, I think only one of those is the Haste.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's one.
Okay, good to know.
So the good news is we are seeing kind of a firming of ASP across all of the different variants, right, of Electron. Certainly, as Pete mentioned, the Haste variant really kind of helps bring up the ASP. Partially because it's a bit of a unique vehicle, but also there's the different mission assurance requirements that those Haste customers require versus a traditional commercial launch. You don't kind of get the same kind of rinse and repeat the benefits you get when you sign up a 10 launch commercial deal. But all in all, I'd say that the Haste missions are helpful because they're growing quickly, they're margin accretive, and they're ASP accretive as well.
Cool. And then as a follow-up, kind of on the topic of Haste as well, Rocket Lab was recently selected by the UK's Ministry of Defence to help develop hypersonic capabilities. What are the limitations of Haste at an international level given the defense nature? Like, for example, if the UK were to require a Haste launch from you guys, could that go off on American soil, or is that going to be kind of particular for each government? It has to be from their own soil?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically those launches are from US soil. In order to launch off a foreign soil, you have to have technology safeguard agreements in place, and a whole bunch of those kind of regulatory, or cross government and cross regulatory approvals. Not saying that's not possible, but that is required. And of course, we have to establish a launch site, whether it be mobile or fixed. in that nation, which is no trivial kind of thing. But typically they're kind of joint research programs as well.
All right, I'll pass it on to one of you gentlemen.
Maybe I'll just jump in on Haste. Pretty excited about the growth prospects there. Just kind of curious, can you give us an idea just how big that TAM is? Like, could we ever see a day, maybe long in the future, where there's more suborbital launches to orbital launches for Electron?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the head of the hypersonic suborbital program, was publicly stated as he wants to fly every day. So that now I'm sure not a Haste mission every day, but it kind of gives you a sense of where that program's going. And we maintain in a pretty unstable environment, and the US really needs to get its stuff sorted with a whole bunch of these hypersonic systems. So we certainly see strong growth in that area, and we provide a really important service. So we expect Haste to be a pretty significant part of Electron going forward.
Great, thanks.
And I wanted to follow up a little bit on what Scott was talking about. So there was the AUKUS Pillar 2 announcement in November 2024, and how it pertains specifically to expansion of the United Kingdom, Australia. And I think part of what we saw with the UK deal was it was like 1 of 5 potential launch providers to be able to kind of win a contract. So as we've seen that UK contract kind of come through, how competitive do we think Rocket Lab is? Obviously, I know what your answer probably is for that one, but what can you say with that with respect to the rest of hypersonic expansion opportunities in the rest of the EU? And the reason why I ask is because I know the United Kingdom and several 4 or 5 other countries have kind of a consortium for hypersonic with like high flight and things like that. Like where do we see the potential for that UK to eventually maybe spill over? And I know you're going to say one country at a time, but just wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah. No, I think I think you teed it up nicely. It's like the Five Eye Allies or the AUKUS pillars group of countries that are very deeply sharing in some of this defense technology and things like that. So that's where the core focus of this will lie. Which New Zealand is a partner in the Five Eyes group. So that enables us to engage very deeply there as well from a New Zealand side. So I think and with respect to your question of how competitive we think we're going to be, I mean, as far as I know, there's not too many vehicles that can provide anything up to sort of Mark 25 with a high frequency and high cadence ability. So we think we're very uniquely placed, and just the ability to produce vehicles at rate and fly them at rate and fly them out of different launch sites. I don't know anybody else in the world who has that capability right now.
Brilliant, thank you.
All right, I just want to circle back to Neutron for 2 last questions. One of them, I feel like you kind of answered it, but I still just want to ask it. So
sure.
I'm the guy who's like, okay, you did a hot fire test on the engine, you see it run once, why can't it be just strapped onto a rocket and then you fly? So for non-rocket engineers, like when you're doing the qualifications of like stage 1, stage 2, like what does that go? Because in my mind it's like you flip on the switch, okay, the lights come on, okay, the canards are moving, okay, it's good to go. Like that's how I would do it, and that's why I probably don't work at Rocket Lab. But what is it that goes into these qualifications?
Well, to be fair, Vince, that's how some others do it, and we all know where that ends, right? So the way we roll here is we'll test and probe every operation, nominal and off nominal, and we don't put anything on the pad or any spacecraft in orbit unless we've thoroughly tested. And I think that's part of the magic of Rocket Lab is we have very good simulation tools, very good hardware in the loop tools, and then when we actually build the hardware, there is no shortcut taken. So with respect to propulsion, we are exploring every kind of part of the run box. And the challenge with the run box in like the Archimedes engine is it's not just a simple ascent burn where you've got very well conditioned propellants and 200 seconds later they're extinguished. You have the added complexity of coasting the first stage for a while, mixing the propellants with the ullage and all the gases in the ullage so the propellants get warm. And then when you go to relight for your landing burns and things like that, then you've got, totally different, conditioned propellants, totally different pressures and temperatures, which all really, really matter. I mean, and, we've gone to pains to make sure the Archimedes is the simplest engine you can build, but at the end of the day, it's still a staged combustion cycle engine, and it's still really complex piece of machinery that when you change the inlet temperatures and pressures of propellants, things move around. So right now we've just been doing, I would say, pretty abusive things to the engine. And really trying to, understand those startup and shutdown transients, and then, all of the things that we need to do. And then, of course, on stage 2, we have a couple of relights depending on the mission. So once again, it can be 45 minutes before you do the relight. So what is the conditioning propellants after that period of time, and how do you define what the run box looks like? So the crude thing to do would be, just do a first stage profile, run a few tests, call it good, but that's just not the way we roll.
All right, thank you for that. And the last question I have on Neutron is the retail group, for some reason, quite understandably, would really like to have a launch party with you present at Neutron, and I understand that it's very challenging because you cannot set a launch date, and you're a very busy person and we don't want to hold you up from the production. So I was thinking that maybe a middle way could be to have, like, when Neutron is ready enough, to have like a retail meetup with maybe someone like Adam or you present, and where the retail could get like a tour of the facilities or the rocket, if this is possible. And obviously for us, the important thing is we have a smooth launch, and we know that you guys are very busy. So yeah.
I'm actually more fun to party with than Pete, just to make a statement there. He's not a real party
That's a
animal,
fact.
but that aside, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, I to Adam's point, I can barely make my own birthday party, let alone like a launch party. And the reality is that if it's launch day, any of us are not going to be interesting people to be around. It is all consuming. I'll most likely have spewing up in the corner with nervousness. That's not untypical of especially a new launch. So and also just kind of the reality of the logistics, right? I mean, we'll put a vehicle on the pad. It's a first vehicle. We'll be working issues, and we'll be working things that we haven't seen before because we'll be doing a lot of stuff for the first time. And look, if it's not right, we'll scrub. So everything has to be lined up and perfect. And I think one interesting thing would be like one of you guys to come and watch a Neutron launch and sit in the mission control, an Electron launch, and sit in mission control and Electron launch. Because I think very few people understand like the kind of ballet of stuff that needs to happen in order to be able to even launch anytime, whether it's all the weather and the space radiation concerns, and then the vehicle and your payload readiness. It's amazing that anything ever launches, if we're honest. And I know that us and others have got a good launch cadence and it looks easy, but every single launch is you could literally write a book on every single launch about various dramas and bits and pieces and things that kind of got in your way. So and give you kind of a sense of just what it takes to launch. But I think a Neutron launch, you don't want us partying. You want us, deep in mission control and eye on the job.
Thank you, and totally understand your answer. And I really had to ask it because I get put into all kinds of groups in Twitter, and the whole group is about, you know, like being neutron. So I for the retail
Nothing's
group,
stopping
it's had,
you. Nothing's stopping you putting a party together, Vince. Why don't you you put the big party together?
And it doesn't necessarily
we
have to
will
be
fix.
around a lawn. It could be perhaps like, like when we get to within line of sight, vehicles on the pad,
Yep.
the right time, we can just kind of, because we're all about creating transparency and access, right? So I think that would be consistent with that.
Yeah, that'd be a much easier thing to do, would be to, as you say it, and we could do like an investor day or something like that, and then there's a vehicle on the pad and you can wander around the pad and stuff. That would be pretty cool.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I think we can go over to space systems if we are done with Electron. And
Sure, if
do
we
you
still
guys
have time,
wanna...
maybe I'll circle back. But yeah, let's go on. Kind of up to this point, I had viewed, like, over the past year, Lightning is kind of the big growth driver for space systems. And now that Flatellite's in the picture, I'm just kind of curious as to how this all shapes up. Is Flatellite just kind of a superior form factor, or is there kind of cases where Lightning would be a better option? And how do you see those two playing out in your spacecraft family?
Yeah, no, they're two totally different things. So Lightning is actually a fantastic national security platform. So it has all of the kind of redundancies and equipment on board that national security missions really, really require. So that's kind of our go-to platform for a lot of those missions. If we're doing, for example, a high volume, large constellation, then every kind of gram of the satellite matters, because it equates to how many you can get into a launch vehicle. And that's where Flatellite really excels, is its ability to dispense with the dispenser and of course maximize every gram on the satellite to add as many of those in a launch vehicle as you possibly can. So it's kind of different products for different things in that respect. Yeah.
Great. So then we won't see, a decrease in Lightning because of Flatellite coming online.
No. I mean, like I say, it's no dissimilar to like some of the Pioneers and those other platforms. They all do kind of different things.
Sure.
I actually also have a question about Flatellite, if you don't mind, Dave, that I jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So on Flatellite, my question is, how did you come up with that idea? And was it something that customers were organically asking for? Meaning, are you in talks with customers about deploying Flatellites? And if not, then what considerations went into the design?
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of devolve the engineering down to, I need to put the maximum number of spacecraft possible per rocket, then you kind of naturally end up at that shape, right? And it's just like a bicycle. Like if you derive the most efficient frame of a bicycle to carry the loads of a human, you end up with what looks like a bicycle. So that's pretty much how we kind of arrived at that. And look, there's other examples in the industry where other people have arrived at the same conclusion. So I'm not going to proclaim certainly any visionary moments here. It's just kind of pretty matter of fact and functional, that's what you optimize down to.
All right. And are you currently in talks with the customers on selling Flatellites to them?
Yeah, look, I mean, we don't do stuff of dreams. We were obviously, customers approach us, and a number of them have requirements for large constellations. So that this is a kind of response to to those inquiries.
Thank you very much.
So I can jump in really quick with a follow-up on that particularly. So I noticed that obviously Mynaric and the laser obviously has a big component on Flatellite, and I was just kind of curious. I know there's pros and cons of using radio. There's pros and cons of using laser for communications. Will Flatellite have both? And what do you see the pros and cons of really utilizing lasers for Flatellite rather than potentially radio, if radio isn't available on Flatellite?
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, Matt. I mean, radio links are, have been done in the past. Laser links are actually pretty new, and it just comes down to bandwidth, right? Like you can just move so much more data at such less, such less scale of antenna and boxes, right? So it basically just comes down to that. So, if you're not meshing your satellites up and you're not needing to hand off data between them, then you can have a pretty low bandwidth radio link, and that's super easy. But if you're looking to be providing a mesh network and handing off lots and lots of data, then you really need the laser links. Even government programs have gone to laser, as we know, with SDA. So it's kind of the next evolution for inter-satellite communication. And then you have to worry about RF spectrum and all of that kind of stuff. Like it's
always kind of my thought is like it's easier to kind of, I don't want to say hack, but I'll use the word hack, but it's less security in my opinion, or from what I've read. And then also it just seems like the interference with so many different people already utilizing it seems like it'd be a pretty big issue.
Yeah, well, it's true. You have a focused laser, and you've got to be in pretty close proximity. And I mean, there's not really any scatter of information. You have to directly, couple the laser up, so certainly you can't just sit on the ground with a big antenna and listen in. That's for sure.
And I guess I'll jump in with the next one, kind of staying on the topic of components. There were a few that were announced during Q1, one of which was the 5 NMS reaction wheel that was largely built on the heritage of Rocket Lab's reaction wheel family, including the high-volume 12 NMS wheel. Is it safe to assume that this new wheel was designed to serve Flatellite, or is it more geared towards external customers, or maybe even a mix of both?
External customers. So it was kind of a hole in the offering, and all of our products are responses to customers' inquiries, or in fact, our own needs internally. But that one is definitely customer driven, and look, you expect to see this from us. We don't really talk about it a lot, but there's a lot of kind of products in development for the commercial market, because we're looking to grow, and we continue to grow all of those merchant businesses. As you become more and more prevalent in each kind of industry, then the only way to grow those is to develop and bring new products to market. So we're always developing new products and bringing them to market to continue to grow those businesses.
Cool. And then as a follow-up, since being acquired in 2022, Celero has seen several large investments geared towards expansions and upgrades. With Starray being announced, are you able to shed some light in terms of the production capacity? Like, for example, if a customer similar in size to the large reaction wheel customer were to come to you with a large order, would the current footprint be able to handle something of that magnitude, or would you need further expansions again?
Well, something like that, you'd need further expansion again, but we have continued to expand that, and you would have seen that we won a lot of CHIPS money to put in new reactors and increase the capacity of that. So we're continuing to invest and increase the capacity of that whole facility for sure. But if you turn up with megawatts of demand, then that's quite a big expansion. But we continue to see a really high utilization of all of the reactors and fabs and stuff. So that's good. But we are, as we mentioned, we are continuing to expand and upgrade that facility. And the Starray is quite a cool product because we have a lot of customers coming to us, and the original Celero business, they would sell either cells or kicks, and then they may put them on a substrate and make a panel, but they never made arrays. So this is a great example. We were able to bring other Rocket Lab kind of businesses together, mainly the mechanisms businesses from PSC, and who are used to doing mechanisms like separation systems, and develop hinges and SATAs and a whole bunch of stuff like that enables us to provide a complete array, and yeah, it just makes it easier for everybody to get stuff done fast.
Cool.
Okay, I'll jump in with a space systems question here.
Better ask
Obviously,
Adam
SDA.
some questions. He'll
Oh,
be getting
yeah.
lonely all by himself there.
You know,
Um,
I'm a better partier. You're a better, kind of question answer when it comes to these technical questions. So keep going. I love this. This is great. I'm getting a little bit of a break here.
Yeah, I didn't have one with the numbers lined up here, but maybe you can chime in on it, Adam. SDA, obviously a very important customer, and I was a little surprised to see they just announced they're pausing procurement of the Tranche 3 transport layer satellites. Do you think this could signal like a bigger shift, or is there any concerns about that constellation maybe changes going forward?
We weren't certainly that surprised with that. There's, if you look at the the transport layer, there's a lot of commercial kind of comms stuff in play. So I think it's understandable for the government, especially when they're looking to save money, to go, okay, let's pause this and let's see if we can achieve what we need to do with the commercial communications or transport layers that are out there. So that's not entirely surprising. But the thing is that I think people, not everybody has a good understanding of the SDA program and its magnitude and the number of layers that are there. So obviously, track is one, but there's a whole bunch of transport is one, but there's a whole bunch of other layers like track and custody and things like that, which are there's no current commercial solution to even comes close to solving that. So you see that the track layers are still moving forward, obviously at full speed.
Great. Yeah, I was pretty excited to hear your comments on that in the earnings call.
By the way, we've learned from our execution under our transport contract. I mean, the facilities clearance, facility security clearance requirements and so forth of handling payload elements. This is not a trivial security undertaking, right? So I have to scratch my head and wonder how much of that was just really to, hey, we've already procured a bunch of this stuff. Let's get it put into use, right? Before we kind of do the next layer, rather than, hey, is there really a wholesale swapping opportunity with stuff that's already out there? Because I don't know, just from what we see from our perspective, it's a lot of unique stuff that you have to do. There's a lot of special, kind of clearance work that you need to do. So I'm just a little bit skeptical that, off the shelf stuff is really gonna get the job done for what they've got to deliver.
Right.
I have sort of a follow-up on this one, because it seems to be that the Trump administration is doing a quite big cut to the NASA budget, and certain programs seem to be on the chopping board. For example, the Mars sample return program seems to be canceled. On the Rocket Lab Weekly, we have a theory that it will come back and it will be renamed and be something else, but we don't know. And it seems like that funds will be rearranged and there will be more funds going into like moon exploration and sending humans to Mars. And what is Rocket Lab doing to stay competitive or, being able to take advantage of these changes in the NASA budget?
Yeah, so not that much of our work is actually historically and even today is NASA based. So it's not like a huge part of our portfolio. Nevertheless, I love the interplanetary missions and those kinds of stuff. So I'm always a strong advocate for that. But for sure, there's going to be some changes there. But the reality is that no matter what happens, if space wins, we win, right? We have just so much componentry and technology across the board that's integrated into so many of these platforms that if it pivots away from the moon to Mars or wherever, that's fine. We just make components for Mars rather than components for the moon. So we'll always have a play. Now, Mars sample return we thought is very unique. We'll see if it's I agree with you, Vince. It's sounding like it's pretty dead, but you never know, especially as the Chinese make much more noise about going there and getting their own samples. So we'll see if it stays dead. But you know, I think it was a great opportunity for us to showcase you know, a true end-to-end solution and how that can really impact these big missions. I mean, $11 billion in 2040 got shaved down to under 4 in the you know, the early 2030s. So that's the power of vertical integration, and that's the power of an end-to-end space company. So either way, I think that certainly changed a few people's minds about you know, what we can do as a company, but also how you go about these big kind of national space programs.
All right, thank you.
And you kind of touched on one of the things that I wanted to kind of ask, which is more of like a philosophical question, macro question. Do you think there's a very modern global space race going on, and what does that mean to you specifically, either you, Peter, or you, Adam? And what do you think that means for Rocket Lab going into the next decade?
Well, I'll give my answer, and then Adam, you should chime in. But I think, yeah, there is. I mean, if you look at China, it is the next evolving space superpower, and it's pretty impressive how quickly they are advancing from you know, from a few kind of old heritage Russian rocket designs through to you know, building their own space station, successfully bringing back samples from the backside of the moon, their own Mars sample return, their own aspirations to land astronauts on the moon. And if you look at the scale and the rate of evolution there, it's really high. And I think that's been noticed by a lot of people. So you know, I think there is somewhat of a space race going on, and I think that's going to become much more prevalent you know, in the coming decade.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think I kind of also look at it from like, you know, it seems like it's picked up a lot of momentum in the course of the last, certainly since, you know, the change in administration, where the geopolitical tensions have risen to the point where you've got this confluence now where you've got a rising amount of tension, even amongst, you know, kind of current or whoever you want to call allies, either former or current. And the access what folks like us bring to the market as far as lower cost access to space. You really have these other sovereigns that used to have to rely on their partners, US being one of those. Now they can really control their own destiny when it coce to having a space-based presence. So to me, that takes something where, you know, if you look back 5 years ago, I would have said, well, this capability would be something that would be centralized and owned by one person and shared amongst many. I think now people don't trust that they'll have access, and they can now afford to do it because the cost has declined so significantly. So I think the concept of the space race is quite real, and I think it creates a multiplication factor when it comes to the size and number of opportunities. And fortunately for us, there are only, you know, there are very few organizations that have all the capabilities that we have. So even if, you know, there's an entity out there that can afford to do it, that's not a US based one, the likelihood that they'd have sovereign capabilities to help deploy what they need is very low. So I think it's going to create a much bigger market opportunity than we were thinking about several years ago. So in some ways, the new normal here is creating a lot more opportunity for us, and we'll continue. And I guess some of it also factors into, you know, what do our allies think is going to be the environment 4 years from now, right? If they think it's going to go back to the old way, then maybe some of that moderates. But I think, you know, kind of what we're seeing now is people are saying things have changed. We need to adapt accordingly. And again, for us, that's just going to start to create more and more opportunities.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer.
On this, I again have kind of a follow-up. So when you turn on the finance news, everybody is saying that Europe is uninvestable, get out of Europe. And yet you guys seem to be very bullish on the prospects in EU. And my question is, what do you guys see there? Is it you know, government customers, or do you see acquiring startups and talent that is in the EU? Yeah.
Well, I think you know, we look for the best teams and the best technologies, no matter where they lie in the world. So that's kind of point one. Point two is, you know, we've always kind of scratched our head about, you know, how do we enter the European market, because as you know, it's very protected markets with the geo return. You know, for those who are not aware of that, it's like ESA collects all the monies, all the money from the various countries, and then distributes it back out in a similar ratio. So Germany is got propulsion, and France has got a whole bunch of stuff, and the rest of the European countries have various elements. So because it's kind of like that, and it's such a protected environment, it's basically impossible for a US entity to work with those work with those governments. By kind of having that facility and company in Europe, then it kind of opens the door for us to work with those companies and countries that we were basically blocked from before. So yes, it's a smaller market than the US, but I mean it's the next biggest addressable market in the world. So we should be in there.
Yeah, and I think, like, for example, if Mynaric it happened to be in Munich, it happens to give us access to these ESA opportunities, as Pete mentions, but it was the best technology solution for the problem that we were looking to solve. And we'd already vetted them and chose them as our solution partner for our SDA, program win. So for us, it's kind of, again, Pete said, we go after talent and the best technical solution. I mean, our first acquisition was Sinclair in Toronto, right? So it's not like Canada's got a huge space opportunity to exploit, but it was a great team, the right product, the right solution. And then we've been able to come in and scale that business, almost 10x since we acquired it only a few years ago. So yeah, it's all about finding the right team, the right talent. And I think that's one of the things where, some of it's more of the advantages that we've talked about with New Zealand, where we're able to hire really talented people from all over the world into New Zealand much easier than we can hire that talent in the United States because of ITAR restrictions and such. So again, I think we're in a really advantaged position to kind of get to take on these kind of opportunities. And I think Mynaric is, again, I wouldn't think of it as a European deal. It's just going to be a very strategic addition, and it just happens to come with these other side benefits.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we've been, to Adam's point, we've been global day one. So, to operate in different countries is not scary to us.
All right. And are you looking at other opportunities in the EU, or it's not like you're not looking at EU, you're just trying to find the talent, and then if it happens to be wherever, that's where you go?
Technology first, technology and people first, and then, everything else second.
Yeah, and when it comes to to deals, we talked a little bit before on our call, and it's a very active time right now. I think that there's a lot of deal activity, and I think fortunately we seem to be the go-to for when an interesting asset looks to come to market. I think first it's probably driven by employees saying, hey, where do we want to be, right? I mean, certainly, the private equity owners or the VCs and so forth, the shareholders try to get the highest price, but it's no small consideration to think about where the asset would fit best from a culture and everything else. So we see everything. And so then maybe we're seeing a higher deal flow because of kind of where we sit in the ecosystem relative to our market cap and our broad platform. But it is very high. There's a lot of activity right now.
Thank you for that extra info.
So I wanted to kind of jump in specifically on that, the talent pool and the potential as you look for continuing to acquire more and more folks into the organization, and headcount continues to grow. Obviously, you guys have built a worldwide presence, being the great company that you have been, and obviously you're a good home for a lot of companies that are looking to potentially sell. But I was wondering, are you looking to deepen any university partnerships? I was actually at one of the EEE launch pads south of Houston actually recently, and I noticed that a lot of these universities are really starting to get back into post-pandemic the launch and being able to get their certifications, whether Cert 1, Cert 2. You guys are obviously a far ways away from that now, Peter, but I was wondering if there's an ability to kind of foster some of these college university rocket programs to be able to help train incoming operators, mechanics, and engineers.
Yeah, no, we do, Matt, actually, both in New Zealand here and also in the States. We work alongside a number of universities. It's like, to your exact point, it's a great talent pool, and we have a very active internship program. It's the bar is unashamedly high. to get in as an intern. But that has proven just to be a great source of talent. Actually, I was quite surprised last year. I was sitting in on a valve design review for a Neutron, and we went through this whole review, and it was like 98% good. There was just like 2% thing where like, oh, that engineer should have known better than that. And I get right to the end, and we're leaving, and the guy's like, well, my intern's finished now, and I'm back to school. And I'm like, what? You did this whole design of this whole valve program, as an intern? It was truly spectacular. So that guy works for us now, as you can imagine, but some of the kids that are coming through, pretty amazing stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, it's how I got started as an engineer, is internship program. So I'm a huge proponent of that. So glad to hear that everybody wants to work for Rocket Lab. So agree, it's probably a hard bar to chin, but glad to hear.
I'd just be maybe interested to hear about the Venus mission. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about why you remanifested it over to Neutron from Electron. I think the bus might have changed at some point as well, or I know this is a lot as well, but is it still planned for maybe second half of 26, or how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Venus takes a back seat to everything else. But you're exactly right. We did remanifest it onto Neutron because, that particular mass on Neutron is kind of like a rounding error. So it just gives us a lot more flexibility. We can easily put that on as a ride share on a primary mission, like provided the customer agreed. It could stow away underneath a payload plate and nobody would ever know. So from a performance perspective, so it just gives us a lot more opportunities, a lot more freedom to fly that. Right now, the manifest is packed with electrons, and we just continue to sign more and more and more of those. So pulling an Electron off the production line to fly a Venus mission that's purely philanthropic is getting harder and harder to do, whereas on Neutron it's much easier. And then, of course, the added advantage with Neutron is we're using the Lunar Photon bus platform. That is extremely high performance platform. Like every gram in that thing is accounted for, especially when it's launched on an Electron. When it's launched on a Neutron, who really cares? So you just don't have to. It's just not as hard to do anymore, and it removes a whole bunch of constraint on ISP and engine performance and mass and all those kinds of things. So we're always looking for opportunities to fly that mission, and making it as easy as we can is always the best path. So we moved it off Electron onto Neutron and relaxed a whole bunch of the constraints around the bus. So it gives the team a way easier job to do. But I will do an update on that because we've got some cool stuff sitting in the clean room. I just haven't had a chance to do that yet.
Great, I look forward to it.
I've got another question, if you don't mind rewinding a little bit to kind of some more acquisition talk, I guess indirectly. If we look at the recently announced at-the-market equity offering program, roughly 20% of that 500 million was tapped during Q1. Is this a similar rate we could expect going forward, this 20% per quarter, or should we expect something maybe a little bit lighter or maybe even a little bit more aggressive, kind of depending on the acquisition pipeline, or how should we think of that going forward?
Yeah, I can take that. Look, I think that it's the beautiful thing about the ATM program is that it allows you to be flexible, right? It allows you to be kind of either proactive or responsive very targetedly, right? So, if we were to go out and put more capital on the balance sheet, you'd probably want to go do that similar size, call it $300 to $500 million, because that's a kind of an economically interesting thing to go do for certain types of investors. Now, when you do it in, let's say, a marketed deal, you have to give a discount, right? It's typically, let's call it anywhere between a 10 and 15% discount to market, which is not very shareholder friendly. You have to commit to maybe an amount of dilution that you might not ever actually put to work. So the good thing about the ATM is kind of you do it when you need to do it. You can be very precise about it. You don't pay a discount. You basically just pay a commission to the bank who executes on your behalf. So I actually think for certain situations, it can actually be a very, very good tool. But we don't have any defined kind of or prescribed thing that we need to do. We just sized it at 500 million because it seemed like the right thing, from just an economics perspective, to have enough dry powder available. And then, you may have noticed, like, what we tapped was in the vicinity of the Monarch deal that we announced and the capital that could be consumed from that deal. So I think, you can probably expect us to be, again, pretty deal driven on something like that. And the reason people might ask, well, you've got $500 million. Why would you need to tap anymore, even if you had another deal come to focus? But I think it's important because, as I mentioned, the deal flow is very high. And in order to remain credible in these deal processes, you don't want the people you're talking to say, well, we know you've announced this or this and this. And so you really don't have the capacity to really do our deal either. So we're going to go point ourselves in a different direction. And that's why having a certain amount of dry powder is always very important. And it's also very important to be able to point to a facility like an ATM and say, hey, look, we were able to pull down $100 million to go facilitate this other deal that's now public. And by the way, we did it with very minimal to no disruption to the stock because we managed it very tightly. We put a floor under it. We kind of managed very precisely how much of the total daily trading volume we were going to expose the program to. So you can be very genteel with it. And so I'd expect kind of all of that thought process to continue. But no, there is no, hey, we're going to go tap X amount per quarter or X amount per month. It's all very kind of, I would say, for the most part, deal driven. I don't know, Pete, if you see it any different, if you have any different.
No, it's exactly right, Adam. Yeah, exactly right. Well, I mean, highly disciplined about, you're not going to see us blow out, hundreds of millions of dollars and do disruptive things. Very, very disciplined, very targeted. And, as Adam mentioned, like it's a very target-rich environment right now. And it's almost our duty to make sure that we have the ability to execute on some of these things when they come along. So having that ability to, as Adam as Adam says, in a very targeted and disciplined way, create opportunities for ourselves is a super good thing.
One more selfish question on Neutron. We know that there's obviously one R&D launch at least planned. How many R&D launches? I know obviously we're going to try to land this sucker. So is there kind of like a Starship-esque sort of methodology where you fund several launches to be able to get that landing capability down, or is it more so just the first launch is to establish, hey, we can get to orbit, and the rest of those landing opportunities will come from commercial launches?
Yeah, so it's kind of a bizarre program because the highest production rate of stage ones will be at the start of the program, not the end of the program. So it's kind of an inverse production problem. Normally you start off with just a few and then you ramp up production, whereas we'll consume the most amount of stage ones in the history of the program, probably in the beginning of the program. Of course, the most important thing is to deliver the customer's satellite to orbit. That's what we get paid to do. So that will always be the focus to ensure we don't risk that. But it does give us good learning opportunities to get stage one nailed quickly. And the first flight, obviously, we're going to do a soft splashdown. But provided that goes well, we'll slip that bit of steel under there super fast and go from there. And if it doesn't, then we'll continue to iterate on those stage ones. But we've certainly built the capacity we need to be able to build to bang out those stage ones. And it's somewhat painful, but that's just the nature of a reusability program.
Yeah, and I think from an investor perspective, I kind of look at it like that first test launch has a couple win opportunities. The first win, as Pete said, is get the customer, show that you can get customer payloads to orbit, because that's what's going to build confidence in the vehicle to continue to build backlog. The customer doesn't really care if we can return the rocket and put it to reusable configuration. But if success is determined as get to orbit, successful reentry, successful controlled splashdown, and looks like all the data would tell us that, we feel, as Pete said, we could slip the barge underneath there shortly thereafter. That really is the investor win, number two. I mean, obviously, it's also a win for investors when we can deliver customer payloads, but the margin expansion just occurs very, very rapidly when you can get that reusability into play. So really, in a perfect scenario on this first test launch, we basically validate both, right? And allows you to build a backlog and just expand kind of on the confidence in getting that margin to come into focus that much sooner.
Yep.
All right. I think the time is up, so we really want to thank you guys for taking the time and speak to retail investors. I think it's very special when companies give us this opportunity. And congratulations again on the quarter. And we cannot wait to see what news you have and what happens with Neutron and all the rest. So
Thanks, Vince. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
You better get
No,
started
thank
on
you.
that party.
Yeah,
Exactly. I want to see Vince's dance party on the calendar.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Thank you guys so
All right.
much.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye-bye.